Oh, Jason just scratched. I'll tell you what, if there's you just mentioned this, we got the new break rules in the break box. I've only watched a few of the matches from today, but I'm telling you what, I've seen more scratches on the break so far today than I probably saw in the last 6 tournaments combined.
Yeah, I think you're going to see that more and more too. I mean, is you have to hit it harder, or people are trying to cut break to get the one in the side, which kind of just sends the cue ball back and forth across the it's really easy to get bumped and really easy to get pushed into pockets. So yeah, I mean, I think we can expect to see more scratches.
Well, and just to be clear, so hello everybody. Well, it's good to be back. I was gone for a few weeks. I've been on vacation and handling a few things. But this break
What
box.
really happened was he was kicked off the podcast for talking bad about handicap.
Yeah,
don't worry.
It's kind of like
I put him on timeout.
Don't shoot. I've got to follow up. I've got some. Yeah, we'll get back to that. But yeah, wave the white flag. But anyway, the this break box. Just to be clear, it's because they've had the 9 on the spot before, but the break box in the past has always been wider, and now they're narrowing it up to where it's like from the first diamond to the 1 ball, from the first diamond on the head rail to the 1 ball, you have to be inside of that cone or inside of that box, and what that means is you're breaking from closer to center than before, and even so when there was 9 on the spot, when they could break off the side rail, it wasn't so hard to send the 1 towards the side. When they had to break from the box, the only way to send the 1 to the side was they had to cut the 1 ball to create some movement on the 1. But then that would create a more difficult strike and the cue ball's moving more. But now that they're even closer to center, they have to cut the 1 ball even more, which means that there's even more residual energy on the cue ball. And so it's going to be moving more, harder to control, and a slight mishit is going to be much more wild cue ball and much more difficult. So, how has it been working? I haven't seen it yet. How has it played out? What has it done to the break and run percentage? What has it done to the type of game?
Well, I mean, just watching. So right now, I mean, obviously, I'm kind of Jason Shaw right now is playing Christian Serdia, and I mean, Jason scratched on the break twice. Once was flicked off, so he's breaking from the right, cutting to the left. His cue ball's coming off that left cushion, coming back into him. The first time he scratched off the bottom side of the 9 ball. The second time, which I just saw here, and it looks like Christian's going to run out from there. He goes back, forth, scratch. So it goes back and forth twice without hitting anything, and scratches into the bottom corner. And right as I said that, Christian just missed a pretty easy 6 ball. So I guess.
Are there any players that are just saying, screw it, let's just go with a head-on break and break really, really hard?
Christian is breaking from the center, and so he won the lag, broke and almost scratched into the bottom left corner, just put the cue ball right in the center of the table and just cracked it. The cue ball comes, just one of those slow draws right back towards the corner pocket. And then when he won his first game, he broke the balls again and scratched in the same exact way. Just slow drift right back towards the pocket.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, how people adjust over time. There's going to be a lot of people watching, guys like Jason, guys like Shane, the big breakers, just see what they're doing because you can guarantee that they've been practicing it and really trying to hone in on what their approach is going to be. I just hope that, if we're looking for some kind of magic, formula that's going to make the matches more even and more skill-based and things like that, you're hoping that someone doesn't find, the gaff break that kind of turns this into all the other breaks. So, I personally, I'd love to see guys smashing at center on more and more, trying to control the cue ball and just see where the balls go. The cut break, I've seen a couple people make the one in the side already using that. But again, the cue ball is a little less predictable that way too. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of this event once all these, you have 256 players playing pretty much double elimination. It's going to be a long event. It's going to be interesting to see what the shakeout is at the end. Where we stand at the end as far as how people are approaching it.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that one way to look at the break shot in 9 ball too is you've only got 3 balls that are going to directly move towards anywhere close to a pocket, or maybe two. But the only balls that are really in play are the two corner balls, the wing balls, and then the one ball. And so when the one is on the spot, people can play the wing balls towards the corner or the one ball towards the side. With the 9 on the spot, the only ball that you can really try to play is that one ball, right?
Right.
Because the wing balls are going to shoot into the rails. The back ball is going to hit a rail. The two balls behind the one are hitting the side rail. And there's no break that's consistent enough to where you can play balls multiple rails into a pocket. It's just not high enough percentage. So if they don't find a way to wire a specific ball, and the only ball that they're fighting over now is the one ball, and breaking from near middle, the only way to play that is by cutting the cue ball a lot. So not only is it harder to make the one, but it's harder to control the cue ball. It's also harder as they cut it more to get a good spread with the balls. And so even if they're able to make the one, suppose they're able to make the one some of the time, but they get hooked more often because they lose the cue ball, or they get more congestion because they can't get the balls opened up really well. And it could be that even some of the time they're able to make the one and control the cue ball and get a shot. But if they have a number of dry breaks trying that, or a number of scratches trying that, are they losing too much chasing that up? To where, I'm with you. It'll be really. I've never been more interested to see this, and I love it, man. I think that it's about time that we made it so that it's too soon to celebrate success, but I like the direction they're going.
Yeah. And it's, the other thing that you're talking about, the randomness of the break now is too, you're not gonna be able to control that second ball, even if you can make the one. When they were able to make the wing ball and pretty much control the one up table, it kind of really dumbed down the game. And so this is, even if
that ball theoretically in a different
spot.
Well,
that's going to be the interesting thing. If people do start, making that one in the sign all the time, they're going to have to, Shane, Corey, guys like that are going to sit there spending months studying where the two ball goes, depending on where it's racked, and seeing how they adjust based on that. So it will be interesting to see how this goes going forward.
Well, and somebody just said that Corey Dool will figure it out, and you're talking about how, yes, of course, people are going to learn it and understand it, but there will get to a point where there is still a difficulty level to where it can only be controlled so well. So, for example, when you're using a template rack with the one on the spot, it's really, really, really simple to make the wing ball and control the one. Now, if you're starting to, as you start making the 9 on the spot, but you could break from the side rail, now, it's more difficult to control. Now you're making maybe the one on the side is more difficult to control the back ball. In the rules when they had the break box that was wider, like in the 2018 International Open and many of the Euro Tour events, now they're having to cut break the balls, making the one on the side. But even still, a lot of the players have figured out how to make that 2 ball that was in the back go 3 rails in front of the side. And so, yes, they keep stepping up their control game, but it's getting tougher. And now with this, it's possible that it gets so difficult that I guess it's like, well, what do you mean by control? If you break 10 times and twice you're able to make the one, control the cue ball, and get a shot on the 2 the way you want it to, but 8 times it doesn't work because it's too tough to execute. Like there might be a point at which the difficulty of executing is such that you might have a strategy and it might work sometimes, but it's not going to let people just run 10 racks in 2 innings like you've seen in other formats.
Well, I think that this is an interesting thing. So in Beloit, Wisconsin, at the Carom Room, they have a break pot there, and I think it's probably okay to say it, right?
We're going to talk about how much money you won.
No, but
okay.
the idea is so. Well, I don't think it matters. They have a one on Friday night where that'll get up to stupid amounts of money. Like we're talking $4,000 or $5,000 a ball. And the idea that Dave Coles has had of running that place is it started originally in its infancy as a rack of 9 ball. And that's it. You just break a rack of 9 ball with a magic rack, or maybe it's hand rack, whatever it is. You break a rack of 9 ball. And what ends up happening is when you start throwing $4,000 a ball at a bunch of degenerate gamblers, what they're going to end up doing is they're going to end up figuring out the rack. And they're going to sit there and they're going to work at it for all week long to try to get to the point where you can figure out how to break those balls consistently and have a shot. And so what ends up happening was Dave changed it. It was no longer a template rack or whatever it was. It went to a hand rack. Now the way that they rack the balls is they actually have a triangle of 6 balls. So they have the one, I guess the one ball's in there. and then they put the 2-ball frozen to the bottom rail. So if we can imagine the pool table here, the bottom rail, if this is the spot, they freeze the 2-ball to this bottom rail. They put the 3-ball in the exact center of the pool table, and then they put the 4-ball at the exact top side of the table, frozen to the second diamond. And you have to break in from the box, and you have to put your hand on the rail. So all of this is to say, like, they've gone through like 6, 7, 8, 9 iterations of this break, and each time they make it a little bit harder and a little bit harder and a little bit harder, and eventually you get to something that doesn't even look like a rack of pool. But the idea of it is, if you give people incentive to figure out the break, they eventually will, and you're just going to have to keep changing it up, or just accept that people are going to figure these things out. So the 2 on the rail, the 9 in the middle, 8 frozen to the top rail. Okay, so
it's my pickle guy.
Yeah. So the idea of that is this is the first iteration of Matchroom changing the break. Maybe they'll get to the point.
I think the easiest thing to do would be
they're gonna figure it out.
Easiest thing to do would be to just blindfold the racker, and then rack the balls after he's blindfolded, so he has no idea what pattern the balls are in, and then he's got a break, and then you see what happens.
Well, I think they should just find one of the players' children. So I think Jax, for example, would be a perfect candidate for this. Sky, Ashley, bring your kiddo to every one of these tournaments and let him rack the balls for everyone. And once he's done grabbing the balls and throwing them into the side pocket, having fun, yelling ball, grabbing the ball, throw it into the pocket, he'll rack the balls eventually. And whatever they rack the balls is, that's the little Jax is racking the balls for everyone. Perfect.
Well, I'll tell you what. So, by the way, we got a question about the break box. They actually did. That's what we're talking about. It's not exactly as wide as the rack, but it's a much narrower break box than they used to have. So it's very close. But here's where I disagree. People that are acting like, well, there's either a set of rules where, it's just going to get cat and mouse and they'll just figure it out. It's like, no, I think that there's really soft racks, like I said, where it's easy to control. That's going to lead to really short sets and really a lot of break and runs. But look at it in straight pool. Did they ever figure it out to where Mosconi would play the 1 on the side? Like maybe during an exhibition, but like when they played in tournaments, they played safe off the break. In one pocket, they don't open break and find a way to drive 13 balls to their hole and draw their cue ball up table. Corey Deuel's worked on some goofy breaks like that, but no, they skimmed the rack. So the point is that we've seen examples where it gets tough enough to where they don't open break the balls because it's so difficult that's just not advantageous. And so I just think that to act like you can't protect. There's no set of rules that will defend. It's like saying, well, there's no way to defend. Bank robbers are always going to find a way to rob the bank. So what are you going to do? It's like, no, you can kind of shut this stuff down. Don't you think?
They're bad examples. You can't. Straight pool and 1 pocket are fundamentally defensive games. 9 ball is 85% offensive game. They're just designed to be different fundamental games. I don't think that's a great example. And to be honest with you, Larry Neville won the King of the Hill or the Derby City All Around in the 1 pocket, where he cracked the rack as hard as he possibly could, happened to make a ball in his pocket and ran out. So then it does happen from time to. But my point is like if you give 150 players year-round incentive to figure out a rack, that you're going to end up hitting it hard, like they're going to figure it out. Like why did none of the top straight pool players find a way to make a ball off a frozen rack then?
Because even if you make a ball off of a frozen rack, what does it lead to?
Then you can run 150 out without having to play safety.
I get that, but just because you break the ball, a wired ball in, doesn't guarantee that you're even given a shot off of 1 pocket, right?
Well, in straight pool, your odds of coming up with a shot are what? This is a bad. We don't want to go down this road. That doesn't make any sense.
It's kind of getting off track here a little bit. But.
Yeah, well, they're just fundamentally different games. The point that I'm trying to make is when you watch, watch Dennis Arcoyo and Shane Van Boning play their race to 150 with basically these exact rules, right? They
didn't have a zero for break box.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they broke from the box when Shane and Dennis played. They broke,
but the boxes got more narrow.
Sure, but they had a template, and that helps too. But the point is like you said this. You started this originally with 2 out of 10 times they do it well. Okay, well, what happens if it's 4 out of 10? Right, that's a huge difference, right? And it's
right. And if you find one player by the end of this tournament, that one player who figured something out and is making it 4 out of 10, they're going to be there at the end. I don't care whether it's.
But that's a big if. That's a big if. We haven't seen that yet. Yep. That's all I'm saying is we haven't seen it yet.
I think we do see it, right?
Your argument is, well, we're going to see that because the players are going to figure it out. It's like, yeah, well, okay, put it this way. Suppose playing 9-ball, you had to like kick at the 1-ball. And you'd be like, well, the top players will figure out a way to kick a ball. And it's like, I don't think so. I think that's too tough. And so I think that there's a point at which players are no longer going to be like, there might be a point. And my only concern is what if the break gets so tough that the breaking player starts losing more racks than winning off the break? Does that break 9-ball the other way to where players start having to play defense in 9-ball the way they did in straight pool because they can't figure out a way to generate a 50% chance? That would be my only concern about this.
I think you're missing my broader point that I'm coming at. This will get figured out this tournament, right? Because at the end of the day, if 95% of the field is making 2 out of 10 successful breaks, and there's 6 out of 10 that's making 4 out of 10, because they just happen to find the perfect combination of strike and speed to get that ball down with a shot better. Like that's exactly what ends up happening every single one of these tournaments. And like you take that recreated. I mean, Sky Woodward did this for like 2 years where he did get this exact breakdown perfectly, and his 2-ball was over the side pocket, and he was winning a bunch of these events. My point is the people who do figure it out.
These are the most difficult break rules we've ever seen. They're more difficult.
That's the thing. When you get to at the end of the day, what you're looking for is what's going to make it the most random and the most difficult, and prevent it from just becoming a break and run fest. So we don't want to make it. I don't even think any of us, and Demitrius said this, I don't want to get it to the point where nobody can make a ball on the break, or they have no, and then it becomes this. It's no fun to even watch. So you're looking for that area in the middle that increases the difficulty and the randomness of the break shot, but it's still going to, lead to some runouts, and the best players are going to, run out when they have the opportunity, and the best players are going to know how to play the best safes when they can't run out, then they're going to know how to come back on someone, who's not breaking as well as they are. So, that's what you're looking to get at the end of the day, is just the rules that make it tough and honest and reward the best players.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that what they've done by narrowing the break box, I think that 9 of the spot break for the box was like the best rules we've seen. But even then, like you said, the top breakers, Sky and Dennis, they were able to start getting that 1-ball going and controlling stuff. So by narrowing the box, we're not making it so that there's no chance to do anything, but we're just making it a little bit tougher to where we don't want to get it so tough that that the breaker has a disadvantage and then it wrecks the game. Right. But we just want to make it so that we get to see a little bit more play. And so as a result of that, the only thing I'm wondering is it'll be interesting to see, do people still solve it to where it's a decisive advantage? Does it get to the point where it's so difficult that the breaker starts having a disadvantage and we've overcorrected? And also, does it change the game to where there's so many longer racks and dry breaks and push outs and moving games that I think that 2 things that we might see is we might see really long matches. We might see the match lengths increasing. We also might see that the top players have a bigger win percentage now than they used to, because it's like a race to 9 might play a lot longer than in the past.
What about, the other thing, if I interject just one quick second, Nate, because I want to follow up on what he's saying, is I think one of the things that's going to help that too is as you get into the later stages of these tournaments, it's going to be hand racking. So that's going to change the game even a little bit more. It's going to make it even a little bit tougher because there's going to be a little bit more randomness thrown in there. And over the course of time, as these tournaments get bigger and match room gets bigger and 9-ball, whatever, these events get, you'd like to see a day where there's hand racking for the entire tournament. Because they've got enough staff, enough people to be able to do that, right? So if you get into that, it's gonna, it will help. Again, it's about making it just honest and tough, and we'll get to that point.
I'll make a bold prediction that by the end of this tournament there will be a 50% running percentage, and it's because there's going to be 2. I'm talking about like the last 4 players. The last 4 players will figure out a proper speed to hit and the perfect cut. And these players are so good at hitting their same speed and their same cut over and over and over again that there's going to be a few players that do figure this out before this tournament is done. And maybe they go to the next tournament next week with a little bit different humidity conditions, and maybe the air's a little bit thicker, a little bit thinner. Maybe the table's a little bit tougher. Whatever it is, they might not have it a week from now, but
they will figure these
They're gonna
playing
run out on
conditions
50% of their breaks.
The last, I would guess that if you look at the semifinals and the finals, that there will be one player who runs out of close to 50% of his.
It's hard because in one set I could see it happening, but if you want, and I
I'm
get
not
what
saying
you're
from the
saying.
entire tournament. I'm saying like the last 2 matches.
Yeah, I
There'll
think
be somebody
that's
playing that good.
yeah, but see the problem is because I get what you're saying. The only problem with that bet is suppose you have 4 guys left, and among the 4 of them, the last 2 matches, so the 2 semifinalists and then the finalists, among all those sets, the average break and run is 30%. But then there's some variance where some people are only breaking and running 10 and some people break and run 50. Well, the guy that breaks and runs 50 is probably going to win those sets. So then the guy that wins might end up with a 50%. But I think that the finalists among like the break and run percentages towards the end, I think I would bet that it's going to be closer to like 30, 35, something like that.
And I can live with either one. I mean, it's not like, it's
Yeah.
at least it's not a break and run fest.
Yes.
Should someone, you hope someone, gets dialed in and then they became the best player of the tournament. So you just don't want it to be this dumbed down game where
That's
it's
it.
just so easy and guys are running 5 and 6 and whatever. So if someone gets to that, gets all the way through the tournament and the last matches, they run 40% of their break runs, I can live with that.
Yeah.
And then my prediction would be that there's
just
more lopsided scores. I don't think the matches are going to run long as much because they would run long, except for the fact that the top players are going to have a bigger advantage than normal because there's going to be more post-rack play. So I predict that there's going to be a lot of mismatched scores where, like, if Fedor plays a guy who's like a Polish champ that's like Conrad, in the traditional Euro Tour rules, maybe they both play, maybe the sets are closer. But I think that in this format with more dry breaks, more push outs, more moving, I think that the top players are going to have you're going to see a little bit more one-sided scores would be my guess anyway.
Sure. I just think if you give 100 world quality players a chance to figure out this break, they're going to figure it out. They might, like I said, they might not, because the break is significantly harder. I would say that if they played this exact same tournament next week in New Zealand, that given the different initial conditions, it's gonna be, you're gonna have to refigure it out again. But I think that this can be solved by each individual. I think this.
Let
can
me ask
be
you a
solved
question about that.
Given the, sure.
Suppose you had to break from frozen on the middle of the headrail. So frozen from the middle of the headrail. Do you think that they could figure out a break from that position to where they can?
No way.
Okay, so no. I understand that I'm exaggerating, but my point is this: somewhere between, we know that from the side rail they can figure out an effective break. We know that from frozen on the headrail they probably cannot. So somewhere between the two, there's a zone in which you can limit the cue ball to the point where it's no longer feasible to have an advantageous situation. Now we're just deciding when that's possible. You're saying that they still have enough play where they can put their bridge in on the table, they can still do enough.
What I'm saying is, if you give them the freedom to at least tinker around with things, so you give them the ability to move things around within not an area the size of a quarter, but if you give them a real opportunity to tinker, they're going to figure out ways to make it work. These players are just too good.
I think you're right, and I think the question is I think what Matchroom is trying to figure out is how much restriction do we need to gradually increase to where it becomes the right optimal balance for the viewers and for the players, and I think they're on the right track. So whether this is final or perfect, I think they're on the right track.
Yeah, even when you talk about guys figuring it out, I mean, even with the one on the spot and you'd see guys get to final matches, great breakers like Shane, all of a sudden couldn't break for a match. I mean, it's not. There's no guarantees that once you figure it out that this game is going to get dumbed down.
That's hand racking, right?
So you're going to have hand racking in the last 4 rounds of all these events.
You're right, because to be honest with you, when I'm thinking about all this, I'm thinking about like, even them hand racking it in the practice room. I'm thinking like, okay, well, they're going to go in there and they're going to break. Someone's going to break 4 hours a day of their hand racking, but then you go out there and, you got Marcel out there hand racking, who racks the balls completely different than what they do. So, maybe given the idea, because we've seen that hand rack sabotage some players in the quarters, semis, and even the finals of some of these tournaments. Maybe given the idea of the restrictive break rules with the uncertainty of the hand rack, maybe that is good enough. I don't know. I just think that by the end of this tournament, assuming that there is some sort of consistency from the hand racking, that some player, whether it's Joshua Filler, whether it's Jason Shaw, whether it's Shane Van Boening, whether it's some other player that it's too good not to figure it out will figure it out.
Well, we'll see.
And I'm not saying they're going to be breaking at 100% clip. What I'm saying is they're going to get to some level of.
Yeah, I mean, people are going to eventually the top player is going to find a system that they like that works. It's not always going to work.
And to be honest, what they might end up finding out is how to make a ball and keep the one in the, or maybe they find out how to make a ball and keep the one ball close to the cue ball so that even if you don't get a shot on it, you're going to end up being able to play a lockup safety. I mean, maybe that's what they end up figuring out.
That'll be interesting.
Well, and I'll make the opposite prediction. Then I predict that the person that wins the tournament gives up on trying to do all this fancy stuff, and they just start smashing the rack, and like Shane was doing, where you just hit them straight on, really hard, 22 miles an hour, pop the cue ball, crush the rack, make a ball, and fight your way out of it. Because all this other cutting, break, and controlling everything, they're going to either miss the one ball.
Risk. It's risk reward, right?
They're going to scratch. You're going to have so many problems. I predict. I don't know about the winner of the tournament, but I predict that half of the final four are just going to go to an all-out, smash them hard, and see what happens. Break. Let's see.
To be honest with you, that means I got to root against Shane, because if Shane makes it there, Shane has enough influence with his break rapport that anybody else who's going to be there is just going to follow what he does. So I got to hope for Shane to be eliminated early.
You know what would be funny, Nate? You know what would be really funny? What if Shane started breaking really hard and just like crushing the rack for most of the tournament and just outplaying people? And then all of a sudden, like in the finals, he like switched. He actually had another cut break that he had solved. He just didn't want to show anybody until it was time to take the cheddar.
Does that count as a win? Would that count as a win for me then? I feel like that would count as a win for me.
I think for sure that would be a win for you.
All right, Shane. You got a plan. Go on.
Right.
All right. Well, I guess that was a big, long discussion about a break rule.
That's a big deal. I think it's worth it. Excuse me one second.
I think it's one of the bigger things with the whole, with all these new tournaments and the expansion of the pro events and the 9-ball tour, so to speak, things like that. It's important that they come up with this solution. With a solution, and this is probably the most dramatic shift that they've made. I think it's interesting, if you look at it. To me, it was very interesting that there's no shot clock for all the way down to like the last 16, I think, or 32. So I think maybe they're doing. I think maybe they were doing that to give people. I mean, they'll put people on shot clock if it takes too long, but you got to give people a little more time to figure this out with the new system they have.
I think what the problem is with that is the UK Open, they couldn't find enough people to actually run them. I mean, without going too deep into the details, I think they ended up, from what I was told anyways, I could be wrong on this, but what I was told was they didn't want to give enough to justify people working the 12 hours or whatever a day. They couldn't pay them enough to justify them working it, and they were really struggling to find enough volunteers to take on 12 hours worth of work a day for 4 or 5 days straight.
Then you have to kind of assume then that's why in the losers bracket they changed it to race to 8, because they're assuming these matches are going to go a little bit longer as people have to work racks a little bit longer, especially when you get into the losers side where you have the lesser players right out of the gate start playing each other. You could run into some long matches. So I think I'm assuming that's why they changed the loser side to race to 8.
Could be. Yep, could be. But I don't know that you're wrong on that with the shot clock, but that would be my strong
I'm probably
guess.
Wrong.
It's because whenever you come into, especially this event, right, you're into a new area. The UK, they have a rapport with a lot of the local players, the local tours, the local referees. They don't. I would guess that they don't have that in Germany. I don't think that they have a ton of local people on the ground that they can use to recruit help like they can in the UK. So if they can't get that in the UK, I mean, I can't imagine that you're going to end up getting that in Germany, where you have way less contacts. So I'm guessing that they're not having the shot clocks on every single table like they did in the past, not because they don't want it, but because they can't.
Makes sense.
Why don't they just have the other player do the clock?
Beep, 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 beep.
Someone like Dennis would start at 3. Speaking of locals, local flavor and local people, it's interesting. It was interesting to me that the two of the the countrymen who the German players all look up to the most lost right out of the gate. Torsten lost in his hometown right out of the gate, and Ralph lost right out of the gate to fellow German players who aren't nearly as known. I thought that was kind of interesting. It doesn't mean a damn thing, but I thought it was interesting nonetheless.
They have Roman Hiebler on the bracket as German. They got a German flag.
I thought was he like I thought he was. I lost to him in a U.S. Open in like 2009. Had a good tournament.
Not Germany.
He played a really suffocated. He was really solid. I mean, like really, really solid when I played. I thought I played. I'd won some good matches. I was playing really well. I beat some really good players, and all of a sudden I played him, and he was like just suffocating, like airtight, really, really solid. That guy, I don't know. He's kind of under the radar. He's not top
solid, man. He's a great player.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't remember where he's originally from, but
I'm like 90% sure he's from the Czech Republic.
That's what I thought.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Like 99.9. I know he's not German. I know he's not German because he's played. He's played on the World Cup of Pool team. I'm pretty sure for the Czech Republic like a trillion times. Like he's not German.
Well,
but they have a German name or flag next to his name, which is. I mean, I'm saying this like I know he like, but.
Maybe he moved. People can move, I guess. But
Veronica moved, but she still goes under the German flag,
Jason Shaw isn't playing under a U.S. flag right now.
No. Well, even Niels, will always play under a Dutch flag, even though he lives in Denmark. But but two people I know are German for sure are the Fillers. And they're dialed in to face each other in the third round. They're both favorites by ranking, at least, to get to that third round match, which would be interesting. That would be a lot of fun. I would hope they would put that on table one.
That would go to the winner of. So I was
winner that goes right into the 64.
Well, I was going to say that. Yeah, the winner of that goes in. Looking at the bracket, do you think it would happen where Josh would forfeit that match? If he has like a player that he doesn't think he could lose to or whatever on the B side, and of course that's a little disrespectful, but the idea is
hugely disrespectful.
Would you? Well, I mean, there are players who are drawing dead against him. Let's be real. I mean, 3/4 of this field is damn near drawing dead against Joshua Filler in his shape right now. But I guess as what do you think about doing that? What do you think, Mike? Would you think about like losing that match or just forfeiting that match to let your wife into the final?
I would never seriously think about it if I considered myself a real athlete, sportsman. Sure.
I had to argue this in the past because when they play in the past, like Pia would actually forfeit to Josh in terms of like she forfeited to him in Turning Stone, I believe, this year. I believe that was the tournament that she forfeited to him, and we had a discussion on the podcast and. Everyone's like, well, why the hell would you forfeit? Like, take a swing at it. You're not an athlete if you're giving up matches. I'm like, well, they're not playing that match as an athlete. They're playing that match as like a financial thing, right? I mean, you go to a tournament to win money. You're a professional athlete. And if they decide that Josh has the best chance of them making money, why would they play it? All you're doing is
you could take that to other tournaments with players who aren't married. Players who are from the same country, perhaps, and are splitting pots with each other and all that stuff. And to me, that's just doing business. That's just business, and I don't like it.
Yeah, I will tell you that I've done things that, upon review and reflection, I've regretted because I was a young pool player, and even not all that long ago, like I found myself in situations that I wasn't. I never really sat around and asked myself, like, what would I do in this situation? What would I do there? What would I do there? But I had a match where I went to a tournament with Jesse Engel, and he made like the final, I guess he made whatever. He was in like 5th place or something like that on the loser side. And I was coming to the loser side playing match after match, and I had to play like 1 more, 2 more to get to where I'd end up playing Jesse. And he's a better bar table player than me, and he's fresh and he's playing good. And I don't know why, but we decided that if I could get past, I think, Oscar, if I get, then I ended up getting past Oscar, and so I ended up playing Jesse, and then I just let Jesse keep going because I was like, he's got our best chance. We're going halves, and you know what? I made that decision because it wasn't. But looking back, like I'm not saying I regret it because the past is the past, but I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't do that again. Like I was just one of those things where I did it more. I don't have a good reason other than just I hadn't really considered like I hadn't really reflected on how it jives with my values. And now looking back, I'm like, no. And now there's no Calcutta, and I wasn't like trying to chop anybody. It was just looking back though, it's like, no, that's not right. You play,
Yeah,
and I
think
understand
that,
money and all this, but it's like this is not the right thing to do,
and honestly, I think in the more cutthroat world of going to bar table tournaments in Iowa and wherever, and with some friends, and you're trying to split up some money, whatever. But if you're at this level where you're trying to consider yourself a professional sport and be on TV and all that, that stuff's got to just go away.
Yeah, when you have sponsors and fans. Yeah, when there's sponsors and fans,
got to go away.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry about that match, but anyway, but yeah,
it would be. I never looked at it from like a gambling aspect. Like theoretically, if this was like a golf thing or like a tennis match where you actually can bet on who's going to win, the idea that you would let your wife
take
go
a dump,
into
and I think what it really has to do with those, it has to do with what is the arena, or what is the game board. Like if pool is played on the table, which means that everything you compete on is on the table and you always give your best. Some people then, they do this thing where they look at it like part of the strategy is partnering with the right people and doing business as part of the strategy, or letting people advance as part of, because the overall strategy is how can we take the most money out of this tournament, and that's the game we're playing, and pool's part of it, but then this other stuff is part of it. And so I think that it's like, if people don't really consider it, what I'm here to tell people is no, the game is only to be played on the table, so you're always to do your best, and you're not to try to do stuff else. And it's the same thing with like managing a handicap or managing all this other stuff. It's like no. Always do your best. Leave it all on the table. You can play strategically and take intentional fouls and stuff like that, but only within the confines of those 4 rails. Outside of those 4 rails, that's not the game anymore. Do your best. Have integrity. Yeah.
This is I'm with you there until you say have integrity, because I don't think that this actually is like a really interesting thing, right? Because I don't think that. Okay, so if you're going to say have integrity,
Nate, hang on. I'm just interjecting. I'm just telling that for everybody else because I want them to do that so I can cut them all up.
Yeah. Cheers. Yeah. So
this is all meta.
Yeah. So the idea, I guess, the idea is like when you're saying have integrity, that implies that if you don't do what you're saying, that you don't have integrity, and I'm kind of somewhere in between on this because I don't know. So it's like
you're gonna say you have integrity when you dump a match.
Well, I could think of a situation. If you look at a pool tournament as how am I going to, it's gambling, right? And when you gamble, you're putting money into something with the hopes and expectations that you get something back from it. I don't go to Vegas and put $100 down on the Dallas Cowboys to lose, so that I could just lose $100. Although that's a guaranteed win, and that's a shot against Nate because the Cowboys suck. But the point is whenever you put something in when you're gambling, you're expecting or hoping something to come back. So if Fedor's right there. If I were to buy Fedor in a Calcutta, and somehow miraculously I have half of him and I have none of myself, and Fedor and I are playing in the finals of the pool tournament, and if I win the tournament, I cost myself $5,000, and if I lose the tournament, I win myself $5,000, I would be stupid. If you're trying to maximize your profit out of the pool tournament, which is what gambling is all about, if you're trying to maximize the amount of money that you can win based off of that, then why wouldn't you let him win?
So this is the easiest way.
The word, I don't think the word integrity fits into that conversation at all.
Well, I agree. But here's what I think is like when you play poker. Poker is a game of deception where you're trying to there's a game that's established to where you're trying to pick up information. It's totally fine in poker to give off misinformation or to confuse or mislead your opponent. It's totally fine. But they also have like certain etiquette rules to where certain things are kind of considered off limits or angle shooting or low integrity. And so there's a social. So the question is, where does the game begin and where does the game end? Where being deceptive inside of this box is okay, but being deceptive outside of that box is dishonest. And so,
can I jump in?
Okay, go ahead.
Because there's a really, really interesting story. I just saw this video on Facebook, and it goes to exactly what you're talking about. This guy who's like his fourth language is English, and he's playing a poker tournament.
Where he says call, or he says raise, and then he puts it. Yeah. I know it's the angle shooting. Yeah.
So basically, what the guy does is he's got the nuts. He's got like quads or a full house or something like that, and he's got the nuts on the board. And so guy makes a bet going into him, and he throws out the chip. He says raise, and then throws out the chips to call. And he's basically pulling a move. Like he was saying, oh, I only wanted to call it, making it look like he didn't actually want to raise. But now he's being forced to raise because he said raise. And now he's like, oh my goodness, like English is not my first language. Like he's saying this thing like, oh my God, I didn't want to raise. Oh no, this is going to cost me money. So he throws like the minimum bet out there. The guy Snap calls it immediately because he thinks he's like accidentally doing this, and it turns out he's got a full house and he just cost himself an extra bet where he would have folded had he come over the top and raised him.
Yeah, had the guy confidently put in a raise, he would have folded. But since he pretended like it was accidentally being enforced, So this is an example of angle shooting. And so what I'm getting at is there's always a socially there's the part of the game where we can deceive and play competitively, and then there's the part of the game where it's not the game anymore, and you're supposed to act the way we do it. Like it's almost like in the game, the natural, normal rules of society get suspended, and we accept that we're going to be fighting and trying to kill each other within this arena. And where's the balance of the arena? And I guess what I'm saying is that's not for me to decide or for Mike to decide. That's for society to decide. And I think what we're saying is, as a society, we're fighting on the table, and we're not fighting to manage your handicaps, and we're not fighting to see how we can, win this match or let this person pass. We're not fighting outside of the box of the game begins and ends within the rails of the pool table, and that we should keep it on the pool table and not outside of that. That's all.
I don't think so. I guess in my example, do you think it's fair then for me? Let's just go to the absolute extremes. Let's say I have all of Fedor in a 10-ball tournament, and I have none of myself. In the first place for the Calcutta is $10,000, and second place is $5,000. So Fedor and I are playing in the finals of this 10-ball event, and if I win, I lose $10,000, and if I lose, I gain whatever the tournament difference is between second and first. Do you think it's then an okay move?
For that.
Go ahead.
I have an answer for that. And by the way, I've been in that exact spot. I had all of Shane and half of me in a big tournament one time, and I played him in the finals, and I made more if Shane won. So here's the answer to that. The right thing to do is do everything you can to win, and then that's the right thing to do. Now you can sit there and say, would you do that? Or what if it was $1 million? And I guess now we're playing this question of like, would you steal if it was for enough money? Would you break the rules for enough money? What's your price? Does everybody have a number? There's certain things like that. But I think my answer to that would be, it's the right thing to do is to play your hardest all the time. And that if you can't do that because you need the money so bad that you can't afford to put then you probably shouldn't put yourself in that spot.
What if I need the money to get some naked HD AI dating services? Does that change the context at all?
Tell Fedor to quit posting that stuff, for Christ.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to jump off the stream here, guys.
Yeah, I'll be right back. Fedor, don't you win enough playing pool? You gotta try to get like
Jesus, Fedor, come on.
What's going on?
So here's my answer to that. And where this whole discussion started was, and I prefaced it by saying, if you're playing, a bar table tournament in, Tennessee, there's different sets of rules. The integrity part to me comes when you're trying to pan yourself off as a professional sport. If you're a professional sport, Nate, you can't you can't be part of the Calcutta. You can't bet on another player in the tournament. All that stuff goes out the window. And that's where the integrity comes into the sport. And then you don't have to worry about that ever becoming a problem.
I don't disagree with that. I think that's exactly right. With that being said, if you look at a pool tournament not as a way to test your skills against your peers, and you look at a pool tournament as a way of generating and making money, I think you're doing a disservice to the idea of that by not maximizing your profits too.
But here's what I would say. Here's what I'd say to that though is that
take that into professional tennis. Take it into other professional sports.
This doesn't exist in those.
But what I'd say though is that you can look at it that way. But if you look at it differently than the vast majority of the pool players, then the question is who determines what's right and what's wrong. So, for example, if I say, hey, what if I look at it like we have laws and everybody follows laws in our society, but what if I looked at it like I don't follow those laws and I can go rob a bank, and as long as I don't get caught, I didn't really do anything wrong. If I look at it that way, I mean, who's to say that my truth isn't as real as anybody else? It's like, well, here's who's to say is the rest of the people in our society. So we have a social norm, and we can enforce it socially. So listen, people can define their own morality and they can justify their own behavior, but the rest of us get to say, that person is doing something wrong. You don't get to. It's kind of like Louis C.K. had a bit about how, somebody's like, yeah, I'm not being an a-hole here, and somebody was like, you don't. He's like, you don't get to decide that. That's not for you to decide if you're being. That's for other people to decide. It's social conformity. So anyway, I'd say, for one person to rationalize in their mind why they're optimizing some game by taking advantage of certain things, it's like they can rationalize it themselves. But ultimately, we have, as a society, we have the ability to form our own opinions and judgments. And I think as a society, we've considered that to be not the way pool ought to be.
It's like so one, I do agree with what you're saying in a sense of but I think your analogy is bad, because if you're talking about the breaking the rules, well, there's something that's infrastructurally exists to decide whether or not you're in the wrong there. It's called the court systems, right? So if you do something dumb and you say, well, I think it's okay because I wanted the money and the bank didn't want it, so I could take it, right? Well, then you get to go to the courts and they get to decide whether or not that is okay. But secondly, you're like the kind of guy that you play Monopoly with, and you land on Boardwalk, and you got these 4 little houses on there. And I'm like, you know what? I want you to win because it's going to make me money, because we bet on the side that you would win. So I'm not going to take any of your money on those houses for rent. And I'm just going to let you keep going and go past goal, collect $200, whatever it is. I don't care. As long as you get to win. Like, that's kind of what that ends up being, right?
I don't know. Like I think that what you bring up one good point, which is this. I understand that there's a difference between laws, which are very, very well, hopefully well defined, versus societal standards where you have more of a spectrum, where you have a majority of people that feel this way and then small groups that feel differently and it's not, the consequences of the laws aren't as clearly defined. But that's, again, man, this all sounds like, to me, this sounds like the type of rationalization that somebody that wants to just do what they want to do is going to use to justify their behavior. And in the end, I'm like, there are consequences to this stuff, which is that, I know people that justify, all kinds of things. And you know what? In pool, what I love about pool is it's almost like we have a credit system we don't have a FICO score like we do with credit reports, but there's like a pool hall street cred where there's certain people I won't play because they're bad action. And there's certain people, like, is there a rule, Nate, against playing, say, let's play some 100 a game, and then I lose one game and I leave and say, I owe you 100? Is there a rule against that? Well, there's no law against it. So who's to say that's not a good strategy? Well, I'll tell you who's to say is everybody else is going to be like, yeah, don't play that guy. You know what I mean? And so we have a street cred in the pool world where it's not against the laws, but you can be labeled as bad action. You can be labeled as somebody that you don't want to play, or somebody you have to post the money with, or somebody that you got to watch, or somebody that you don't want to play with on your team. And that's how we enforce it. It's like a social credit report. And I would say that people that behave in ways that are outside of the norm, which is play on the table, fight it out, give your best, and act with integrity, the way society defines it, people that act outside of that, there's not against the law. They get to do what they want to do. But as a society, we get to say those are bad action. And if I'm a sponsor, I'm not going to sponsor that person. I'm not going to put that guy in a stream. I'm not going to support that person and fundraise for him. I'm not going to invite him onto it. You know what I mean? So that's it.
Well, I'll say this. One, I still don't like the word of the integrity there, because I think integrity implies something that integrity just, I don't think that it's an unreasonable. I don't think it's unreasonable for somebody to want to maximize profits by gambling, because at the end of the day, you're going to a tournament to gamble, and if you're trying to maximize your profit in that gambling, I don't think that means that you don't have integrity, if that is your sole goal in a Saturday tournament, whatever it is. But with all this being said, like, honestly, like, I agree with both of you too. I'm just trying to get the devil's advocate argument.
I understand,
but I've done this in the past.
The problem is, I did this one time too. By the way, Josh and I were playing in a tournament. We had all of Josh and only half of me in the Calcutta. And Josh and I got to the finals. So we're chopping. So we've already won first and second in this tournament. And now it's a matter of, do we get all of first and half a second, or all of second and half of first? So we made more money if Josh won. So I let Josh win because I was thinking about it that way you talked about it. Like, well, optimizing our money, it's better if Josh wins. And on the way home, I just wasn't really, I'd never been in that spot before. I made what I consider to be a horrible mistake by doing that. I realized that, yeah, I'm optimizing my money, but by throwing a match, and B, I'm taking money from the guy that bought me in the Calcutta. That's what I'm doing. So it was actually, we all know the guy. I could tell you who it was. He's from Wisconsin. So I felt really bad. So I called him on my way home, and I was like, bro, I'm sorry, man, I'm wrong. And so what I ended up doing is we figured out what half of first and second would have averaged to in the Calcutta, and I paid him half the difference because that seemed, and he was okay with that. I offered him, like, I asked if that was okay. We worked it out. He was fine. He actually was glad that I called him and talked to him about it. So, but yeah, it was the wrong thing for me to do. And I hadn't been in that spot before. I hadn't thought it through. So now I have thought it through. So I'm here to tell everybody else that finds themselves in spots like that, just play hard.
I don't disagree. I found myself in that spot too. I've never done what you've done, but I mean I've thought about it a ton of times. And to be honest with you, I've been in tournaments in the finals where I never had the discussion with it. I don't have a road dog like you do, where like I kind of go halvesies with it. I just kind of play for myself. But I've been in the situation where I've played players in the finals that I've had in the Calcutta, and all of them. And I've had that situation, is what I'm trying to say. And I've never done that. But in my head, I've thought it. And if you're thinking about it in the back of your head, you can't play your, maybe it makes you play more free, and maybe you play better. Maybe you play worse because you don't really care if you win or not. I mean,
but as long as you try, as long as you give it your best, it's okay. You're human. You're going to be distracted by these thoughts, but as long as you do your best, that's what matters.
And I think I remember twice where it's happened where there was like an $80 difference. It was just like a little open tournament. There was like 17 or 18 players or something like that. And I didn't have any of myself in the Calcutta, and I had half of the other person. And I ended up losing that one. So I ended up making money. But then I had it in another situation where it was actually like $600 or $700. That was the difference. And that cost me $600 or $700. And I won that one, cost myself the money, and then got tipped out better than I would have ever thought I would have because of that situation. So,
well, one last question: do the rules change if you're a professional and you're doing this for a living?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm joking,
Absolutely.
Nate. That's
no,
okay.
Absolutely. Well, this goes back to what Mike and we're kind of.
But you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking
about. But Mike was one who made this perfect. Earlier, like this doesn't happen in other sports. This isn't available in other sports. Like this only exists in the world of pool, basically, that I know of, anyways. Calcutta doesn't exist in tennis. Nobody's walking up to Tiger Woods and asking him if he wants half of himself in the Masters. Like that just doesn't exist, right? But that happens all the time in this game. It's just different, right? There's no place for stuff like this on the national scene, or at least the world scene.
At this level, it should just not even be a discussion.
If they want to,
you're talking about with like the European Open, and U.S. Open, and things like that, shouldn't even be a discussion.
I don't think that it doesn't have to happen, but the player should have nothing to do with it, right? The player shouldn't get an option to buy their half. If you want to have a
obviously you can do whatever you want, but and you can do that in other sports. You can bet on whatever you want. Exactly. You can cover your bet by betting against yourself, and so. But you don't ever allow anybody who can control results to have any part of any kind of action. I mean, that's professional sports. If they ever want to get on TV, if they ever want to have sponsors outside the billiard industry, if they ever want to be legit, the first thing people are going to investigate is, are you guys on the square?
Yep. Bingo. Yep. I agree. I guess we're talking about basically like you said, that tournament in Iowa, right? That's So
getting back to Pia and Josh, if one of them forfeited, they should get fined.
100%.
100%.
Fine.
It affects the whole field. It affects the other players.
I don't like the idea of them getting fined. I would actually, to be honest with you, I would be okay with them being disqualified out of the tournament, which is like a fine, right? But I would not like the idea of them being fined. But I would, if somebody came, you're disqualified from the tournament.
Fine. Yeah.
For the, you're disqualified for the integrity of the game. You're questioning the integrity of the tournament and the match and the industry as a whole. You're going to be disqualified from this tournament. I would be okay. I would be much more okay with that than if Josh said, I forfeit to Pia, and then somebody turns around and says, all right, well, that's going to cost you $10,000. That sounds weird to me. But again, that's just a preferencing. So,
yeah.
I mean, if you're trying to maximize your profit in a tournament, though, it wouldn't. I don't think it would be I don't think it would be a bad idea for Josh to let Pia go through, depending on who's waiting on the other side. I mean, he's not going to want to do it if Jason or somebody like that is waiting on the B side for him. But if he's playing some no name from, I don't know, pick a country, and doesn't think that he can lose to him. why wouldn't you take a swing at it?
Well,
Maybe.
my closing thoughts on this. I don't think that maximizing your profit at a tournament should be the goal. I think your goal should be maximizing your performance in the tournament. But I also think that people are going to be tempted. So therefore, I think that the tournament directors and our pool society's job is to set up the incentive structure, to set up the tournament structure to where playing your best is going to maximize your profits.
Sure.
And so that's the problem. That's why when we start getting into Calcuttas, when we get into handicaps, when we get into divisions and skill differences and all these things, then and teams and all this, it's very in side betting. There's a lot of avenues that can split to where what's best for profit no longer aligns with best performance. And the closer that we can align best profit is going to be best performance, the less of this we're going to see. And so it's all about incentives. And I think it's the tournament director and society's job to set it up to where people are incentivized to just do their best. And I think at the top levels, that is generally the case because the value of a reputation when you're a top player and visible and playing in pro tournaments, you don't want to lose sponsors. You don't want to lose invitations. You don't want to, it's not worth screwing around for. And I think that at the amateur level, the better the tournament directors can set it up is the best.
Yep, I agree. And I do want to reiterate that I was playing devil's advocate on that. I agree with basically everything that was said. But I don't think that it's completely ludicrous to think that there could be a different side to that. But absolutely not at a level like this. No way. But I don't know. Let's we probably lost Fedor, but let's talk nice about Fedor for a while.
Yeah.
Oh, don't. He's his antenna will go up as soon as his name's mentioned, so he'll hop back on if he's off.
Well,
so let's take a look at this. He has now beaten the brakes off of. Can you make a top 5 U.S. one pocket player list without having Chip and Scott on? I mean, just a U.S. list.
U.S. yeah, probably. Yeah, of course.
Probably
they're both on that list. Yeah,
I would think that they would both be on it. Maybe you want to say Scott isn't quite there anymore, but I still think that there's a pretty. I still think that Scott absolutely should be on it. But
sure.
And he's beaten the brakes off of both of them. Tony is the last American left that theoretically would have a chance. What do you guys think? Do you think? I don't think Tony can get there.
Fedor's only going to get better, and the discussion with playing Chip was the game's going to be different when he plays Chip because Chip's going to push all the balls to the top of the table, and it's going to be a whole different. It's not going to be these runouts, whatever. And Fedor just tortured him. So, I mean, listen, the kid can play anything he wants to play at a level that's right up there with the top in the world. He could start playing, Carom tomorrow, and by Thursday he'd be giving some pretty good players a run for their money. So, it's he's just a beast. And Tony's probably the only one who can give him any kind of game at this point in the U.S.
I don't know that he can. I don't think that. I mean, if they played the same game that Chip and Fedor just played, I struggle to see a situation where even Tony gets past 20. Fedor's just special. I mean, it's just sick. Demitrius, what?
Yeah, and so Fedor's watching. I mean, I got to play him a set in January, and it was still one of my favorite sets I've gotten to play in pool. He controlled. I mean, there's a level of striking that is just different. It's just different. And you're right. As the game has evolved to a more offensive game, as the moves and the strategies, if this was the 70s, to where the only way to learn one pocket was by playing it for 10 or 15 years and matching up and all this stuff for many years, the learning curve was longer back when there was a knowledge, an information deficit. And so a player that was a top player that was going to start playing one pocket would be at a disadvantage to the one pocket specialists for a longer stretch. But nowadays, the books have been published, the videos are out there. People can watch all the one pocket matches on YouTube, and within a matter of if a player plays, I mean, Fedor's, for anybody that plays Derby a couple times and plays some one pocket tournaments, the learning curve. I think here's an interesting question. Let's pick a player that strikes the balls as well or very close, like Victor.
Alex or Dennis.
How long would it take Victor to get to the point where he could beat Chip? How long of playing one pocket? Like how many months? If he made a focus on learning one pocket and playing one pocket, how many months of playing pool and focusing on one pocket until he wins? Is it 5 years? Is it 2 years? Is it 6 months?
I think it's closer to 6 than it is anything. I mean, if he dedicated 100% effort, right?
And so,
Yeah,
I think that, go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
No. A lot of it to me comes down to Fedor is just obviously incredibly bright and a real sponge when it comes to knowledge. And that's, were there better ball strikers than Efren? Yeah. But when Efren got into one pocket, he's so smart and so calculating. And so, that he, improved exponentially more quickly than most other players who were as good as a ball striker, say, as he is, or better than him. So I think a lot of it comes down to what's between your ears too. And I think in that category, and I have no idea what's between Alex's ears or whatever, or Victor's ears. I just know that Fedor is obviously incredibly sharp mind. He just seems to absorb that stuff. So, I think it's a little harder than to analyze other players and say how long would they take them to get to that level.
Yeah, Fedor's, one of a kind. And so, but yeah, to get to your point though, Nate, I mean, I think that the top strikers in the game now have such a control with the cue ball and control over the balls. They're knowledgeable. They understand not just one pocket, which they understand, but they also understand, the ebbs and flows of matches and the mental game and being able to control all the balls and how the balls react. And I just, Filler runs so many balls in straight pool. So like, I think who are the top, like, does a U.S. player have a top 5 in the world? Because right now, if I had to pick, I think that Fedor, Filler, and Dennis would be like my top 3 in the world right now, with Alex fighting to get into that top 3, maybe being, maybe he could pass one of them and be third or something. But I think those are my top 4s: Alex, Dennis, Filler, and Fedor.
For one pocket?
Yeah.
You put Filler in your top 5 for one pocket right now?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I mean, after watching what he did to Johan, yeah.
I think Tony's. I still think that Alex and Dennis are the only players I think that can give Fedor a game at this point. If you look at Fedor, just beat Chip Compton 24-12. Tony beats Chip even up by, let's say, 6 games. Let's just give Tony 6 more games against Fedor. I mean, that looks like 24-18 to me. Like, if Tony plays his best game, I just don't see how he can make up 6 games. But with that being said, like, I guess putting Josh in there is a bold statement. Josh doesn't seem to be interested in the game at all, but he's such an elite striker of the ball.
Didn't he play Johan in a long one pocket set and he just ran through him, right?
No, it was 24-21 by the end of it. And it was I commentated that match with Alex lately, and it was on a super loose table. It was, for one pocket standards, it was loose. I think it was 4.5 inch pockets. It was a pro cut table that Roy's basement, and I think that's 4.5. It was one of the U.S. Open tables. You just tighten up the table to 4 inches or 4.25 inches, and I think it makes that game completely different.
Okay,
but I think that Tony, if you don't put Tony on your top 5 list in the world, I think that's pretty rough. I think he's comfortably on it, I would say. Mike?
Yeah, fair enough.
I'm not saying he wouldn't be. I just think he might be 5th. I'd bet Filler, I'd bet Fedor, I'd bet Dennis, I'd bet Alex.
I think the only person on there that I could argue with is maybe Filler.
Right.
Maybe. I mean, I can't take. I love Tony, but I can't take him anywhere close to Fedor with what I'm seeing. I don't know that Dennis or Alex get there at this point, but they're the only 2 players that can in the world.
I think it would have to be Dennis, because I think that Dennis is still striking at an elite level, and I think Alex the last couple of years, I'm not sure that his striking is I don't think he has the advantage in striking that he used to. But I'll tell you, to be fair, I'm not saying Alex can't win. I mean, trust me, I was ringside watching Alex hit the balls. He still strikes the balls as well as anybody. In terms of like executing the cue ball maneuvers and the crispness of the hit. But I just think that Dennis is like, if I'll put it this way, if Dennis and Alex played rotation, I think Dennis gets there. And I think just that little half step of execution is going to help Dennis carry the day against Tony or against, if I think Dennis would have a little bit better chance against Fedor just because he's striking him just a little tiny bit better.
But my reaction wasn't my reaction to that wasn't because of your statements about Alex. It was about Dennis. I mean, Dennis. The last time we saw Dennis, but we haven't seen Dennis. When did he get? Was it back in March or February that he got booted out of the country?
No, it was earlier than that. I think it was earlier than that. I think it was end of January, beginning of February, wasn't it? But anyway, it doesn't
it could have been. Well, I mean, the only time that we've seen him since is twice. We saw him at the UK Open, where he didn't really do anything of Dennis's standard, and then playing against David Al-Qaidi, and he lost to David Al-Qaidi too. Not saying that he can't lose to David Al-Qaidi, but nobody's going to say if that was like a real match for $100,000.
Well, I think the general thought on Dennis is that Dennis isn't interested unless there's a lot of money on the line, right?
Sure.
And now he's sitting at home trying to get visa issues sorted out, gets turned away at the immigration office. I just don't think his heart or his head's really into playing top level big money pool right now.
Sure.
Again, just a hunch, just a speculation, because I have no idea. I'm not there, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's the case with him right now. So it's kind of hard to judge him at this point.
Well, you're right about one thing, Mike, is that I guess I wasn't really thinking about it until you bring it up, but like Dennis and Alex are both in their 40s. Fedor, he's hungry, and so just on that, I don't know that there's anyone I would bet on over Fedor right now, just from a fire and striking and hunger and just peak performance. It'd be really hard to want to bet against Fedor on anything and against anybody.
I can't argue. I mean, I'm still going to take Tony, or I'm still going to take Alex over Tony until I can, see Tony take that from him. And then we're not going to see Dennis anytime soon, probably, it looks like at this point. So I guess for the two people that are viewable, the top two are Alex and Fedor, and I don't know that anybody can get there with Fedor right now.
Let's throw out the other name, because there was another one pocket match with Roberto Gomez versus Corey Deuel, and they played best of 7 sets, races to 5. So they played races to 5 and one pocket until somebody won 4 sets, and Roberto Gomez won 4 sets to 2 with a total game score of 28-20 against Corey Deuel. Now, Roberto Gomez has lost to Chip Compton last time they played that I can remember. And, he has, so he didn't ever establish that he was, if he's losing a Chip and Chip can't get there with a top 5, Chip's probably in the top 10. So then, I figured Roberto was kind of like, level down, but he's been playing a lot. He's striking the balls well. Where's he at? Is Roberto in the top 10? Is he knocking on the door of the top 5? Where's he at these days?
I mean, I was really high on Roberto Gomez I guess pre-COVID. I thought that there was 3 players who had comfortably set themselves apart from the rest of the world for my money. And that was, in order, Alex, Dennis, and Boosty. We haven't seen Boosty for 3 years, something like that too, since COVID, basically. So, I mean, you almost got to remove him just by default. But I thought that Roberto was the one player Tony and Roberto were the 2 players that were within sniffing range of those 3 players. And then Roberto just got the brakes beat off him by Chip, and I didn't see that coming. I mean, we lost money on that, if I'm not mistaken, Demetrius.
Yeah, we probably lost a little something. Yeah,
I think we lost a little money on that one. So I mean, Roberto hasn't played a ton of one pocket since. So this is the first matchup I think that he's played since he got beat up on by Chip, if I'm not mistaken.
I'll tell you what, it would be really interesting to see him rematch Chip, on the one hand, I think Roberto is going to be better prepared and play better, but on the other hand, Chip is playing as well as he can. I mean, Chip's really playing phenomenal. So just because he lost to Fedor, I mean, trust me, that doesn't mean anything because that means he's not the best in the world. That's all that means is that Chip's not number one in the world. But yeah, I think that I'd love to see a rematch. I wonder if they rematch. Who would you bet on a rematch between Gomez and Chip?
I've come to the conclusion I'm never betting on Chip no matter what. Both before. I mean, so Molina Mike hasn't been on the show for a little while, but if you ask him who he hates more than anybody else in the world betting against, it's Mika. Like Mika is like he loses so much money betting against Mika, and that's like me with Chip. I like whether I'm betting on him or against him. No matter what it is, I'm on the wrong side of it. Always. I just stopped betting anything Chip. I'm done.
Don't you know that it's unlucky to be superstitious? Okay. No, that's anyway, I think that if they rematched, it's hard to say. I think Chip is playing really, really, really good one pocket. I think it would be, I'll tell you what, I think it's going to be a very close match if they replayed. I think that Gomez is probably playing better than he was, and that he has a very good striking game. But Chip plays phenomenal one pocket, man. So I think it would be a tough game. I think that Gomez is probably in the top 10, but so is Chip. And I think it's kind of like trying to figure out, is Chip 6th or is Chip 8th? And I think they're both kind of in that, 6th to 8th kind of range.
Yeah, I agree. That's probably where I place them too. I don't know. I guess I'm watching here. I kind of went over to the OmegaBilliards.com page and was just glancing kind of at this. And the last day, Fedor Gorst won 8 racks to 1. I mean, there's got to be a give up factor in there. There's got to be.
Yeah, there's
some 100%. Point in time.
That's what I was just gonna say. I mean,
but
that's one of those fold up the tent and go home deals.
Yeah, like get me out of here fast. Right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm happy that all the matchroom stuff is going on because while I like one pocket and I just can't get enough pool content, from seeing the production and the class that is put into matchroom events and to a lesser degree, not even a big lesser degree, but a slightly lesser degree, the Predator Tours stops. These like little point a camera at a table, one pocket matchups, and Omega Billiards actually does a little bit. They do a little bit better at it than some, but like the idea of this point a camera at a pool table and like charge $20 or $30 for the matchup is like it's nuts to me. Like,
I've just never really had interest in watching those anyways. I want to see real tournaments with real players and real conditions, and that's what I follow. That's what I enjoy. So yeah, the events like European, great. Looking forward to the next 4 days, not getting a lot of work done and watching a lot of pool. And really, I mean, one thing we didn't talk about with the European Open and the U.S. Open coming up is that these are like moving day tournaments for Europeans trying to get a Mosconi Cup, right? Because you can be way down on the list right now and you get into that top 6 here or something like that, or top 8, you've made a move. So it's really going to be interesting to see who comes out of this, because that's really going to set up the U.S. Open really nicely in terms of, and it's that scoreboard watching is just a lot of fun when there's so much at stake. And there's just a lot more at stake with the European players than there are with the U.S. players. So, it's going to be interesting to see who comes out of here, haven't made any big moves on the chart for European Mosconi Cup, and it'll really set up that U.S. Open really well. There's a couple of more tournaments in between that, but they're the $5,000 first prize type of thing that's not going to move the needle a whole heck of a lot.
The Euro Tour that Francisco Sanchez Ruiz won that I guess none of us are talking about either.
Yeah, kind of like that. The one that was the one that's prize money was just slightly under the junior event that Ernesto ran out in Sacramento. So so it's for the Europeans, big deal. For the U.S., let me ask you this: where's Billy Thorpe? So he just figured he's got it dialed in, so he doesn't need to go to the European Open?
Why does he need to?
I don't know. If Jeremy's already told him he's in, then I guess he doesn't need to. It would be a shame, but
well, at some point in time in the U.S., who are you going to take over him?
People who are trying.
I'm not arguing, but I mean, I got myself in a lot of trouble for picking on Greg Hogue, and it was totally just a joke. Greg, I love you. I love you, man. I love you, man. I really was a joke. But like, are you gonna? I mean, if I went to all these tournaments and tried my absolute damnedest to get in onto Team USA, do I deserve it more than Billy Thorpe, who's put a lifetime worth of work into this and is just coasting more than normal? I mean, it's not like Billy Thorpe hasn't worked to get to the level he's at. He just hasn't worked in the last 8 months. And are you going to take somebody like me, who is, obviously I'm not at that level, but I'm not far behind the players who you are talking about that are trying, right? I mean, I'm not that far behind those players, and I'm a mile behind Billy Thorpe, a mile. Like, I'm so far behind them.
Well,
So
that it's, to me, it's a dangerous game too, though. Then, because
it is. Well,
what happens if all the points things go to not Sky, and not now all of a sudden now you got to pick between Billy and Sky with your only wild card pick. Okay, then Billy didn't play himself out of a spot. So
theoretically, there's 2 wild card picks, right?
Yeah, there are.
What about
Shane's never going to be a wild card pick, right?
No, absolutely not.
So you're looking
theoretically,
at,
Sky shouldn't be either, right? I mean, the idea that Sky's going to need to be a wild card is like blasphemous. Like, what the hell? Like, over the course of the year, what is the U.S. right now? Let me actually take a look. I last I checked, it was like $4,000 was in the USA. Like that got you in.
So someone has a good European Open, someone has a good U.S. Open, and all of a sudden you can put some people in your rearview mirror in a hurry. An Oscar, or someone like that, right? Tyler, even at this point, right? Tyler, to a lot of people, Tyler's not even in the conversation. Well, meanwhile, he has a big tournament here or at the U.S. Open, and
Oscar Dominguez right now is second place in the U.S. with $7,000.
Okay,
and then
so
Sky
now
Woodward is number 3 with $5,700.
Okay,
From there,
so
Shane
one good
Wolford,
tournament, and one good tournament between European and U.S. Open, and all of a sudden those guys are hoping for a wild card.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it's like I said, I like guys who chase it. We've had this argument, in terms of Fedor with Team USA, with Team Europe. Is he an automatic pick for Team Europe, even though he hasn't played? Probably, but I like, I would always defer to the guys who are out there swinging every day.
I don't necessarily argue with that, but there is a scary thought to the idea that working really, really hard and being at every single one of the events automatically qualifies you to represent the USA.
No, it doesn't. It just gives food for thought for the guy who's making the picks to say, you know what, I like this guy's work ethic. I like the way he's improved over the last year. I could see it on a tournament by tournament basis because he played in all these tournaments. I'm not just guessing. So, there's a lot to be said for that, I think. I mean, who the hell knows?
I don't disagree. Yeah. I mean, looking at this, Billy Thorpe is currently 7th in the U.S. with $4,300. So he's behind Nick DeLeon and Greg Hogue, as well as Oscar and Sky and Shane. So and Shane Wolford. So I don't know. I guess at the end of the day, I love to see the players on here like Shane Wolford, Greg Hogue, Nick DeLeon, where these are the type of players who are they're just doing everything that they can to grind their way into. And
that's I like those guys getting rewarded, as long as they've shown that they can beat some top players and finish.
And what is it? Yeah.
So if Shane Wolford and Oscar have good tournaments here or in U.S. Open, they get a $10,000 bump or something like that. Then it makes the wild card picks really interesting.
I just wanted to mention what does it do to the guys like Wolford and how if they feel that they can't get chosen because if they don't take exactly top 3, they'll never even be considered because we're just gonna, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, that was the argument that's always gone on in the U.S. over years when it was all wild card picks and they just kept picking the same buddy system type stuff. And it's the argument that I made, against Fedor for Team Europe what does it say to a Victor Zielinski or some of these guys who are beating their brains against the best players in the world every week, and are up there and winning here, but they're going to get passed over for someone who in Federer's defense,
A unique
he
case.
didn't have a choice. He didn't have a choice this year. So but when I look at someone like Billy, I'm like, geez, what's the problem here?
I would say in Fedor's defense, he didn't have a choice.
Yeah,
and
100%.
No one's going to question he's probably the best player in the world right now, or at least top three.
I don't think Victor's going to say, listen, I'm as good as Federer. Pick me because I played in all these tournaments. It's not going to happen. But it's it's one of those interesting dilemmas that a captain gets himself put into when he's got to make these picks, especially when you have a continent as strong as Europe.
So let me ask you this question: do you think Jeremy Jones is begging for somebody like a Shane Wolford, or maybe an Oscar Dominguez, or a Nick De Leon or a Greg Hogue? Do you think he's begging for one of those types of players to make it into the top three, so he could end up potentially using that wild card pick on a Sky Woodward and a Billy Thorpe?
I don't know. I don't know if he's rooting. I don't think he would be rooting for it for that reason, because he could always pick them as a wild card too if he wanted to. So,
but that goes into what I'm saying is, like, at the end of the day, like, if you have, let's say your three qualifiers are Shane, Sky, and Billy, you now have to take two wild card picks,
right?
And now you're picking between players who theoretically don't have to be there. As far as you're
saying there's more controversy.
Well, I'm saying that if you have no choice but to have a player like that on the team, and you're able to then pick Billy and Sky for your wild cards, and let's say Greg Hogan, Nick De Leon make it as number 2 and number 3, and now you get to pick Shane and Sky and Billy. Well, now who wouldn't pick those two with your wild cards, right?
What are you concerned about? Controversy over the picks? Because you end up with the same 5 guys either way. To me, whether if you had Shane, Sky, and Billy as 1, 2, 3. You're still probably going to end up picking an Oscar and a Nick De Leon or a Shane Wolford is your wild cards anyway. So
what I'm saying is your wild card picks are exactly obvious if it's Sky and Billy. If it's past that, I think that if you're Jeremy Jones, what you're rooting for at this point, what you're begging for at this point, is for those other guys to show progress and strong results going down the stretch, so that he's confident that they're ready to play when he picks them, either as wild cards or as numbers guys, as automatic qualifiers. What you want is guys who are improving and on a hot streak and playing well and having knocked some guys off. I think he'd much rather have that than to have the luxury of picking Billy as a wild card, because he hasn't beaten anybody all year. Sure, but what I'm saying is, let's ask you that question. Do you think? So let's create a hypothetical situation where Shane, Sky, and Billy are your 1 through 3.
Right.
You have a wild card of 2. Do you think of the pool of players that you're talking about there? Do you think that any of them will be playing well enough, or have those scalps, or have the performance to easily justify that pick?
That's what Jeremy's hoping for. They do, and you go with the 2. You go with the 2 that do. If they don't have those scalps or they don't have those results, you're going to probably pick them anyways, because the guys who aren't playing, you have no barometer, no gauge on them at all, right? So yeah, I mean, Jeremy's hoping that these guys make his choice easy by playing well enough. He's got 2 guys. He's looking for 2 guys that are playing well enough to say, I'll take these guys into battle with me.
But what I'm asking is, do you think that's going to happen? Because that's a pretty big big ask.
No clue. I mean, we'll find out in this tournament. We'll find out in the U.S. Open whether a Shane Wolford can put 2 good tournaments together in a row, whether a Tyler Steyer can put 2 good tournaments together in a row, and that could be finishing top 16. It could be just showing some. These guys are getting better. These guys deserve a shot at this. That's what he's going to be rooting for, and I. We'll see what happens. Can Oscar have 2 good tournaments in a row? Sure. So that's as U.S. fans, that's what we're going to hope for, is that a couple of these guys make some strong finishes over the next few tournaments, and
what is a strong finish for you?
For an Oscar, I mean, certainly if you top 16 or quarterfinals would be fantastic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I would
yeah,
go with that, and I'd go for that in a
that
heartbeat.
would be for anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I expect those. I expect at least 3 of those guys to get into the final 64. So then, can they win 2 matches in the final 64? That would be against pretty good competition. I would say that they're showing progress, and I'd be pretty, you know, confident about them having a decent shot in Mosconi Cup.
I tend
If
to
they all
agree with
fall
that.
on their face, then maybe he looks at someone like Tony Chohan. Who the hell knows?
Yeah, well, I'm not trying to say that like I don't think that any of these players have a chance at this, but I mean, if I got to be real, and my job here, I guess, is to give my honest commentary. I think the over under on 2 players outside of somebody named Shane or Sky making the quarterfinals of anything is next to 0.
Yeah, quarterfinals. Yeah, that would be like a miracle. But final 8.
Or even the top 32. I think it's very unlikely.
Yeah, Jeremy Solsi got top 16 at the World Championship. He's playing really well too. I
think a couple of those guys could hit top 16 if they catch a good gear and play well. And that's what you're rooting for at this point, right? Is to show.
Well, I'm hoping
show me that you're going to be a good player come Mosconi.
Yeah, at the U.S. Open, we had a U.S. player take top 16. Oh no, never mind. I was thinking John Mora. Forget it. Never mind. But, I think like Bergman and Oscar, they've got final 16, final 8. Yeah.
Well, you'll never see Bergman again.
No, never see Bergman again. And Oscar final 8, that might be asking a lot. But
I think if there's one person that can get final 16 or potentially even final 8, I think it's Oscar. I think that's the list of names right there.
I'd love to see it.
You just named it.
Love to see it. So.
I would love to. I'm rooting for Greg. I'm rooting for Nick. I'm rooting for Shane. I think they're all phenomenal ambassadors for the game, and I think that they're doing a lot of great things by going to every single one of these events, putting their head down, whining about nothing, and just playing the damn game. I mean, it's refreshing to see that from our U.S. players, but that doesn't make them an 800 Fargo. I mean, that at the end of the day,
tough out there. It's pretty tough.
It's brutal. Yeah, it's brutal. I mean, they're gonna have to, be beating some really great players to get into that. And I'd love to see it, but I mean, if we're up against it, the odds.
Yeah, no, of course, we've been up against it for the past 12 years.
I could see a situation where I could see a situation there though that Jeremy Jones would feel a little bit of relief, even getting one wild card pick be something like Sky. I could see where he could get some relief there because he can say, well, this is what I got. This is the players that made it in. There's nothing I can do.
He would love that, like I said, for no other as much as anything, because that means that one of those guys earned the points.
Sure. Well,
which means he's got to be playing pretty well to earn the points to be in the top 3.
I definitely agree with that. But the idea is like I said, right now $5,000 gets you in.
You know what's funny? I never thought about this, but what do you think? What do you think the prize money won by the top 5 Europe versus the top 5 US will look
that's
like?
Kind of what that's ultimately kind of what I'm getting.
What gets you in for Europe right now?
$31,000, $32,000.
$31's number 3.
31.8 is Albin Ocean. 31,800. Okay. Francisco Sanchez Ruiz has 42,520, and Josh has 62,520.
What's 4 and 5?
23,000 Alex Kazakis and 20,000 Oliver Solnaki.
So 20.
And 19,000 is Victor Zielinski. Mario, he's at 18,006. Jason Shaw's at 18,002. Niels Fine, 16,003. Max Lechner, 14,002.
When you hear these names and you hear that prize money, I know this is not new information, but that's kind of sad.
It is sad, but when you look at it and say that our number 2 or 3 guy is into 5s, that's even sadder.
And then I look at the names of this next tournament at the Sandcastle Open. I'm just like, man, am I glad I don't have to play these guys to fight over 10 or 15 grand. Oh my gosh. Oh.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Right on.
There are 23 European players between number 1 and number 2 for the U.S. So, I mean, down to, 23 players. And there's 23 players between Shane Van Boning and Oscar Dominguez.
Okay.
And then there's another.
And that matches
10.
Fargo rate almost exactly. If you look at Fargo rate, you look at where Shane's at, then you look at the next U.S. player. It's
kind of right.
I mean, very similar. Yeah. Good times. Well, and I will say one thing before we wrap up is that, you're talking about these one pocket matches and one camera. I like it. So the thing for me I think that there's something for everyone. I love the European champion. I love the championships. I love watching the Final 4, Final 8 of these matchroom events and all this. But I also like the one pocket matchups where you get to look at like a Gomez versus a Chip or a Fedor versus a Chip, where you get to see like, okay, you've got the experience and the moving versus the striking, or you've got the offense versus the experience, and then you get to see how those match up, and then you get to see them over days where, okay, day one it went this way, how do they adjust their strategy for day two, and what do they try to do to mix it up? I like that type of thing, and I think that you don't get that when you watch, championship 9-ball where everybody plays the same run out game, and then it's a matter of the break, the strike, and a couple key shots. I trust me, I'm not minimizing matchroom and top tournament play. I love it, but I think that there's just different ways to enjoy the game, and I like all of it. So
I do agree with John too. I love hearing Josh Roberts on the mic. I think he's one of the most underrated commentators in the game. I like Josh. I think he's great. All right, well, that kind of wraps up our discussion. Two people. Who are your two picks? If you could pick anybody in the European Championships, who's your two players, Mike?
European Championships.
Or not the European Open. Sorry,
the European Open.
Two players.
Josh for sure, hands down. Bottom half of the bracket. Well, do they redraw?
No, they just fit in.
Is Fedor playing or no? I can't. Okay, then I'll go with Josh and Albin.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. I was going to say Albin. I like Albin in this kind of tournament.
I'm still going to pick Fedor.
That's nice. You can't.
No, I like. I don't know. I like Poole. I'll say Josh. I'll say I want to go with Josh and Alex Kazakis. I like to pick, not scratch. I'm not even going to pick Josh. I'm going to say Alex Kazakis and David Al-Qaidi. Those are my picks.
Okay, good deal.
So there's a quote that when I think about Fedor, I probably said this before, but I think it's one of the best quotes ever. There was a guy that was they were talking about Bobby Fischer in chess back in the 60s. And they were interviewing different players that had played against Bobby Fischer and asked them, like, what was your experience playing Fischer? What's it like? How do you feel? And there was all these different quotes and all these people talking about Fischer this and Fischer that. He plays so strong. And then finally, after all these long answers, you had this one guy that just said, it begins to feel as if one is playing against chess itself. And I just love that quote. And I just feel like Fedor, when you're playing Fedor Poole, it's like you just actually feel like you're actually competing against, like if the spirit of 9-ball took the form of a player, it would be Fedor. It's just super strong.
All right, we went really long today, but I thought we had a fun discussion. So
it was fun.
Thanks, guys. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Yep, we'll see you next week, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.